let yourself dream big. Let yourself, don't keep yourself boxed into some small, well, I only deserve this, or that's too much. I'll never, forget that. Like, set your goals high, aim high, and really go after whatever you're passionate about.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Helping with Dr. Richard Schuster. Food for the brain, knowledge from the experts, tools to win at life. I'm your host, Dr. Richard. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, and whatever you do, this is the show that is going to help you become the best version of yourself. Each episode, you will hear from some of the most amazing, talented, and successful people on the planet who followed their passions and strive to help others. Join our movement to get 1 million people each day to commit acts of kindness for others. Together, we're going to make the world a better place. Are you ready? Because it's time for your Daily Helping.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Daily Helping Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Richard. We are live on location at the Park City GoBundance event. It is absolutely amazing, and I have met some of the most incredible people like the person I'm about to introduce you to right now. His name is Sterling Shrout. He's a father of 2, avid adventurer, small business owner, and real estate investor. Now, what's really interesting, the rest of what I would typically read to you is the stuff that you would go, wow, as you're listening to this. And I'm not going to read any of that to you on purpose because I want you to hear his story. It is so powerful. And there's so many brilliant nuggets that we can all take from it. So I'm going to kind of keep you in suspense here for a bit. But Sterling, welcome to the Daily Helping. It is great to have you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, Dr. Richard.
So I want to jump right into it. I want to jump into your story, the challenges that you had, and then we'll go from there. We're going to pull out some things and kind of break them down.
Okay. 31 years old now. I'm from Dayton, Ohio. I didn't start off in a very good direction, and then bear with me through my story because it takes a while to get better. So at 15, I grew up in extreme poverty. At 15, I had, the people I'd surrounded myself with, I'd ended up selling drugs, getting caught for that, becoming involved in, the criminal justice system, probation, jail, things like that. At 18, I get in trouble again. I get my door kicked in by the ATF, ACE Combined Task Force. And that was for trafficking drugs. That was for trafficking ecstasy, possession of a dangerous ordinance, for dynamite, and then engaging in a pattern of corrupt activity for running a drug ring. So from, 19 on, I fight that case for a little bit. I end up spending 3 years in prison. Get out right before my 23rd birthday. And, kind of based on that whole theme of where I was as a teenager selling drugs to, young adult. Now I'm getting out of prison as a felon. And I didn't gain any skills while I was incarcerated. So I get out and I don't know how to interact with society. I try to, do the right thing, get a job, get my stuff together. And there was a certain point specifically where I remember kind of like the last of my self-esteem, not to put down anybody who, works fast food or any of that. But for me, I thought I was, better than, working at McDonald's to, flip French fries or hamburgers, whatever. I go and I apply at a fast food place finally, and they turned me down because of my record. It said they can't hire me. So then that was kind of the last straw in me trying at that point. So I ended up hanging out with the people I used to hang out with. I got burned bad enough by the experience of, selling drugs that I didn't want to mess with that anymore. But I remember the comfort that doing drugs gave me to deal with those feelings and the, anxiety and being scared. And so I fell right back into doing drugs, except for this is, 2014, height of the opioid epidemic. Dayton, Ohio was greatly affected by it. So were a lot of places around the country. So I fell into that, and it took a lot of years to, get from 2014 to where I am now. I spent, a couple years just, committing petty crimes, just being homeless, sleeping where I could, living in, abandoned houses and a vehicle if I had a vehicle at the time. Ended up running to Florida because they wouldn't extradite to Salvation Army rehab down there. And at that point, I still didn't know I was a drug addict. That was just my life. I was just existing. I didn't have any plans or goals or anything, or much self-awareness. And so that was the first time I was exposed to the idea that, like, you can get better. You don't have to be, a victim of your circumstances or upbringing. And I got to see other people who had done what I wanted to do. And so the hope was instilled there, and I managed to get sober for 2 years, and I was went through AA, and I mentored people, or I was a mentee, and then I mentored people. I ended up working for the rehab that I was staying at. Then I relapsed and moved back to Ohio, and this all culminates in August of 2019. I had, since getting that initial desire to get sober, I had been, fighting with it back and forth. I didn't know how to stay sober. I would get some brief sobriety, relapse, and that cycle kept going. At the beginning of 2019, my son was born, and I was doing good then. He was a few months old. I had a brief relapse. Well, that relapse resulted in me overdosing in a Taco Bell drive-thru, and it was a really significant overdose. I didn't come back until we were basically at the hospital already, but something there clicked. I realized I didn't want to die, and then, just completely destined my son to, a life of struggle. And we can kind of pick up from there if you want, or...
So there's so much to unpack there. I have to ask, because it kind of struck out to me, and it may not even be terribly relevant, but it's a point of interest. Why did you have dynamite? Why were you arrested?
Oh, yeah. That wasn't like a gangster, drug life thing. That was the true intention was just kind of some, redneck's the wrong word or whatever, but I was going to blow up a washing machine, like at a junkyard, just something. That was the intention of it. It wasn't, super sinister.
Okay. That struck me as odd. So, what's interesting and very typical of people that go through the recovery process is there are peaks and valleys, right? And you relapsed a number of times. Now, I do want to clarify. So, at the time when you had the Taco Bell incident and you already had your son, were you married? Was it just you and the kid, like you and your son? Like what was the dynamic there, family wise?
Yeah. So I've been with the same, my fiance now, for 8 of the last 12 years.
Okay.
We had a, obvious breakup when I was in prison, and I was incarcerated. But besides that, we had tried to make things work and,
Okay.
I almost said successfully, semi-successfully.
And tell us again how old your son was at the time of the Taco Bell incident.
Yeah, so he was 6 months old.
Okay.
At that point.
And what drug was that, if I can ask?
That was fentanyl.
Okay. And a lot of people struggle with fentanyl. And so you said that, this time felt different, right? You woke up in the hospital and, was it having the son? Was that what was the differentiator for you compared to all the other times, is now you had the responsibility of being a parent? Was that what made this different for you this time?
So, having the son, like having, my son be born, I felt a sense of, responsibility to him. I love the child. I think it's different for guys. Like for me personally, I love him more and more and more and more. And, so I don't want to say that I didn't, maybe care about him as much back then. But I didn't know how to, I felt kind of helpless in the sense of, I was trying to stay sober. I was, sober at points, but I still wasn't changing anything. We were still extremely poor, that we were still struggling to make it. The thing with the overdose that clicked, which I don't know, it's an old movie. What About Bob? But when he says your death therapy cured me, that's more of a joke. But no, when I did, they Narcan me and oxygen, and had the whatever convulsions, or my muscles were pumping blood back into my body, and I'm trying to think how to word this. I lost like a lot of guilt or shame or things that you would expect me to feel after that overdose. That stuff was just gone. That, like, I had a definite answer or a truth now. Like, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to leave my son to figure life out on his own, in the same, environment that I'd had to figure things out in. So the only direction to go is forward. Is now now I have to change this. I have to change our circumstances. I have to change what I know. I have to change what I'm able to do, in order to change the outlook for my son, or at least the options.
And so, you now have the will to live, but you still have your criminal record, and the challenges that brings with vocational status. So how did you flip that script? Take us through what happened next.
Yeah. So, because of my criminal record, it was Craigslist jobs. It was, handyman work and just whatever miscellaneous labor I could do. Well, I'd picked up tools along the way, physical tools, power tools, things like that. And I started to pick up skills with drywall, carpentry, minor plumbing, electric. So I started, trying to take on a little bit bigger jobs. My brother-in-law, I built an arcade for him that fall. And after doing that, I had saved up, like $3,000. And this is a real specific point to kind of how all this happened. I asked the Google gods, how do I invest $3,000 to not be poor anymore? And that led to a podcast. And I'd never listened to a podcast. On that podcast, this was my first exposure to the entrepreneurial environment, the self-improvement environment. They were mentioning Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Richest Man in Babylon, all these books. And I was really inspired by what they were saying. So I started listening to these audiobooks. That is where I started to, learn the skills that allowed me to use the other skills I had to create like my own opportunities. Because I'm a felon, I've got 6 felonies, multiple, tons of misdemeanors. I can't just walk in and get hired as myself. I can start a business, the business can get hired, and I can work for the business, run the business. That was a big shift that I learned, 2 years ago now.
And so what business did you end up working in?
So I started a business called Dayton Renovation, and that was originally intended to rehab places for, other investors to start to learn what they're doing. Ultimately, that business got used to rehab my own places that I bought with partners. So they would use their money to buy the place. I would fix it up. That's how I would get my equity in it. Now I'm a vendor for Ohio University. I do lab build outs, commercial building for them. And so besides that, there's other companies that, multi-member LLCs, other things like that I participate in. So.
Hey guys, Dr. Richard here. For the past 7 years, I've been privileged to bring you incredible guests who are changing the world and can help you become the best version of yourself. I'm really excited to share with you a new quiz that I created based on my clinical training that will curate for you a custom list of my top episodes and actionable strategies to help you wherever you are on your journey. All you need to do is go to drrichardschuster.com to take it, and it's 100% free. You'll be taking the next step on the journey to unlocking the power of you, and I can't wait to see where you'll go.
Now, as you were building this, and this is clearly a different track for you than McDonald's, right? So as you're building this, was there anything else that came into your life that radically elevated your success, shifted your mindset further, and helped you develop the skills and tools that you're using today?
Yeah. So all that, the audiobooks, all the podcasts, that ultimately led to the nonprofit I work with now, which is One Life Fully Lived. They were, the way I found them, they were designed to help youth escape poverty. And I'm not a kid, but, I still looked into what they had to, had going on. And I had never done goal setting. I had never done vision planning, working on, specific relationships, and like really working on myself to, be the best person I can and achieve the most possible. Setting goals, setting a vision plan, looking forward. There was one specific thing. It's like 100-year vision. It's, you put yourself in that moment. Like, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Who's around you when you're 100 years old? And I had never thought, about myself 10 years out or 5 years out, even, let alone, where do I want this to end at, and I'll be happy. And that made me really emotional. But, looking back, and it's something I try to help others do, is that gave me the ability to care about future me. Like, yeah, when we talked about I don't want to die, that was a good like guiding star in the beginning. But being able to care about future me helps me save for future me and future my family. It helps me make the health decisions, the time decisions, all these other decisions to get to that future vision, to those future goals.
This is a really interesting exercise, and I want to spend a little more time here because I think most people, there are people that are goal oriented, of course, and if you're listening to the show, you're probably one of them. But I don't think most people sit there and say, what does it look like? What does my life look like when I'm 100? One, most people probably don't think they're going to be 100, and two, this is something they don't do. So you described a couple of different things. You talked about health, and you talked about who's around you. So what are the specific, because I want this to be something that everybody listening to this can actually do. So what are the specific things in that 100-year vision that you need to ask yourself?
Yeah, so it's, the exercise itself, you kind of find a quiet spot. You make sure you have the ability to think quietly, and really go deep on this. But, close your eyes. Picture yourself when you're 100 years old. Where do you want to live? Where, what does the house look like? What does the cabin look like? What does are you at the beach? These physical parts to it. All right, then what does it feel like? Is it warm out? Is it windy? Is there a light breeze? What can you hear? I mean, you really try to place yourself in the shoes, in your, future used shoes as you're there. Who's around you? What are the feelings? What are the emotions that you feel? And when doing that vision exercise, it's almost like a manifestation type thing where you try to experience it as if you're there. To me, that I had never felt worthy prior to that. That was one of a very important moment in my self-worth, to think that I could have generations, under me, like kids and my grandkids running around. That was something that was just a pipe dream, but I let myself feel it, and I let myself feel that I was worthy of having that.
And one of the things that you said that I really liked, and there's actually, Sterling, quite a bit of science behind that. And when you're visualizing something, the more detail rich it is, not just seeing it, but feeling it. The smells, the sensations. If you're on the beach, do you smell the ocean air? Do you feel the sun coming down on you? So I loved how detailed your visualization of that future self was. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people miss in that technique of visualization. So thank you for sharing that. And then I have to ask, so after you do this 100-year thing, then do you work backwards and start planning the steps? Is that what's next?
Yep, that's how they do it. So yeah, from there, where do you want to be at 100, and then you kind of, it's a sprint. Well, that's a whole other thing. Let me take that back. Yes, you just work your way back from there. What do I need to do to at 50 to make that realistic, or 40, or then 30, and then what do I need to do the next 5 years and 1 year? What can I do this week to make that more likely of an outcome?
Okay. And so such a powerful technique, because now you then kind of, if you've broken this down, where it will be at 50, at 30, at 25, however old you are, you now can start actually building the steps into your daily life. What do I need to do to get there? What do I need to do every day, every week, every month, every year?
I really like the metric of, does this get me closer to, or does this take me farther from where I want to be to? That's a super quick way to judge any decision or action.
That's beautiful. I love that. Does it get me closer to, or does it take me further from? So take us through some of the other really critical skill sets that you found from one life that helped you accelerate your life to where you are today.
Yeah. So besides the, vision setting, goal planning, the financial education. So that was a big part of what and it still is a big part of what they teach. And, as basic as just financial ABCs, knowing what's coming in, knowing what's going out, and then either paying off debt or investing the rest. Then increasing your ability to earn. So I thought I knew about money, and maybe I did from like a street hustling perspective, or as much as anybody else that can, go use money at a gas station and, buy something. I had no idea how money truly works. So I really dove into that financial education aspect, and then with budgeting, and that falls back into, does that get me closer to or farther from making the right financial decisions? So for me, without much money to start with, or the ability to leverage bank debt or anything like that, and we were still renters at the time. I had to get really creative, and so the financial aspect and getting financially educated was huge. But then there's also the relationship aspect. So
I do want to talk about the relationship, but I want to spend just another moment or two on the financial piece. And here's why. Because I think there are a lot of people listening to this, or in general, that probably don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars of disposable capital that they can use to invest in things. And you said something interesting. You said when you started this journey in educating yourself on financial literacy, you had to get creative, because you were a renter at the time. You weren't yet a homeowner. Talk to us, give us some examples of that creativity, how you used to shift from, not having that capital towards being in a place where you had it and then could use it intelligently in other ways.
Yeah. So for me, I wasn't a high dollar per hour earner. I didn't have big paychecks coming in. So the things that made the most sense for me were to extremely, tighten what our cost of living was, to really try to hone in on that, make our living expenses as low as possible, because, the term is sweat equity. So I was able to trade my time, and skills for equity in, say, a rental property. So the $3,000 I had saved up, that necessarily didn't get invested into a property. I ended up being a landlord as a renter still before a homeowner. That $3,000 bought my time back from what I would usually have to be out earning to pay the bills, to buy groceries, all these things. That allowed me to go trade my time for equity, which is a future payoff. So it's this delayed gratification. And in that was it was a very creative situation. I had located a very distressed 4-unit Didn't have it under contract. The person that I was initially going to buy it with, who was going to give me the same deal of they would buy it, I would fix it up. We would split the equity gained in doing that. He got called to Germany. COVID was just hitting at the time. Things were a little bit crazy. So it was actually a neighbor, the guy that owned the house next to the one I rented. He was fixing it up for his daughters. I, kind of strategically mentioned it to a few people. He stepped in. And then another example of that creativity, I was 3/4 of the way done rehabbing that 4-unit. Well, he had used a self-directed IRA to purchase the property, to put down the money to buy the materials to fix it up. Well, he can also loan money out with his self-directed IRA. So he gave me a $15,000 loan, not due for 4 years, at a really low interest rate. And that money was to keep me from having to go out and do small jobs and miscellaneous, jobs to pay my own bills. That freed up my time significantly more. Well, by doing that, I was able to finish our first rental property up very quickly. And then that also gave me money to put down on our first house.
Very cool. And then I'm going to bring it back to where you were starting to talk about. You said relationships is a key tenet of what you were learning. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So for me, for me specifically, because of my criminal record, relationships are just massive. They're massive for anybody, but I take it very seriously to, not burn bridges, to do what I say I'm going to do, to really follow through. So besides, the super clear, tangible part of, where we started this conversation is who you surround yourself with. In the beginning, it was people who were doing drugs and being derelicts and delinquents. And, of course, that's who I became like. I think, there's a lot of negatives that came with COVID, but there was a lot of positives. All this started, the beginning of 2020 with COVID, and right, at that same time. And it forced me not into isolation. I had my family around. You could still communicate with people on Zoom. But my biggest relationships in the beginning of my journey in the positive side was the voices on audiobooks. It was the guys like you on podcasts. Those were my biggest relationships. They weren't physical people. And that was huge for my self-worth. That was huge for my mindset. That was huge for, the way I thought, the way I felt about myself. The ideas that I, came up with, those, the conversations you hear on podcasts, the conversations you listen to in books aren't the ones that a lot of people have in day-to-day conversation with people they interact with. So that was a huge blessing for me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And tell us what you're up to now. Tell us where your life is today.
So today, I own my home with no mortgage, which sounds awesome, but it's because I'm self-employed. And so I'm just now getting to the point where I'll be able to, get leverage against the house and hopefully pull some money out of it. I have 2 partnerships, one with some out-of-state people, one with the same partner I started with, where we buy multifamily real estate. And then I try to spend as much time as I can with my kids going on adventures. We went to Alaska, Colorado, Idaho. Now we're here in Utah. I try to just really enjoy my life. And then giving back. That's something that if it wasn't for what, like One Life Fully Lived, what they had poured into me and like freely taught me, I wouldn't be here. So people in my situation with drug addiction, in and out of recovery, I try to teach the things that help me. So with One Life's help, I started a a new kind of branch with their nonprofit, and that's the Rediscover Project. So it's the same entrepreneurial mastermind principle, just taken to people in recovery.
I love it. And I think what's important to point out, and this, you said it, but you didn't really say it. This trajectory, though the pieces were there, the real rocket ship strapped to your back, really, that all happened over the last couple of years, which is what's incredible. What's incredible. Sterling, I loved hearing your story, your humility, and where you are today, and how you're still making a difference, which is incredible. As you know, I ask everybody who comes on the show one question, and that is, what is your biggest helping, Sterling, that one most important piece of information you'd like somebody to walk away with after hearing our conversation today?
I would say the vision, and making sure that you give yourself time to think that far into the future, and let yourself dream big. Let yourself, don't keep yourself boxed into some small, well, I only deserve this, or that's too much, I'll never, forget that. Like, it's set your goals high, aim high, and really go after whatever you're passionate about.
So well said. Sterling, thank you so much for coming on the Daily Helping. It was great having you here. Let me ask you one quick question. Where can people learn more about what you're doing online?
Yeah. So my website is sterlingshrout.com.
Okay, great. And we will have that link to the show notes at thedailyhelping.com. So we've got you covered there. Again, Sterling, this was a great conversation. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I want to thank each and every one of you as well who chose to take time out of your busy day and listen to my conversation with Sterling. If you like what you heard, go give us a follow on Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review, because that is what helps other people find the show. But most importantly, go out there today and do something nice for somebody else, even if you don't know who they are, and post in your social media feed using the hashtag MyDailyHelping, because the happiest people are those that help others.